The engine's hum was the only thing keeping me sane as the Nevada desert blurred past. An endless stretch of sand and secrets. I was 22, fresh out of college, and somehow roped into this road trip with Eli, my brother's best friend, who I barely knew but couldn't stop staring at. By the time we hit that motel, I was already in too deep, and what happened there would change everything. I gripped the steering wheel of my brother's beat-up convertible, the one he'd lent us for this cross-country haul from California to New York. Jake, my older brother, had called it a bonding opportunity before he shipped off to basic training, leaving me with Eli, his charming, infuriatingly confident friend who seemed to know exactly how to unravel me. Eli lounged in the passenger seat, one arm dangling out the window, his dark sunglasses reflecting the dying sun like he was some kind of desert mirage. "Why so quiet, Caleb?" Eli's voice cut through the hum of the engine, smooth as whiskey. He tilted his head, and I swear his smirk could have lit a fire in the dry brush. "Just focusing on the road," I muttered, my knuckles whitening. Truth was, I was trying not to focus on his easy laugh, the way his t-shirt clung to his shoulders, or how his presence made the car feel too small. I'd known Eli was gay since Jake casually mentioned it years ago, but I hadn't figured out my own feelings until recently. And now, stuck together for days, every glance felt like a tightrope walk. We'd been driving for hours, the kind of endless stretch that makes you question your life choices. The plan was simple: drive Jake's car to his new place in New York, crash at motels along the way, and maybe see a bit of the country. Eli had jumped at the chance, claiming he needed an adventure before starting his grad program. Me, I just wanted to survive the week without losing my minder, my heart. The desert sun dipped low, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. Eli fiddled with the radio, landing on some old Springsteen song that felt too on the nose for this moment. "You ever think about just driving forever?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. I glanced at him, caught off guard. "What? Like, never stop?" "Yeah. Just you. The road. Someone who gets you." His eyes flicked to mine, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. Before I could answer, a neon sign flickered into view: Desert Rose Motel. Vacancy. It looked like something out of a bad horror movie peeling paint. A half-lit sign, and a vibe that screamed, "Last stop before nowhere." But we were exhausted, and the next town was too far. I pulled into the gravel lot, my stomach twisting for reasons I couldn't name. The motel clerk, a grizzled man with a cigarette dangling from his lips, barely looked up as he handed us a key. "Room 12. One bed. Take it or leave it." "One bed," I stammered, heat creeping up my neck. Eli just grinned, grabbing the key. "We'll manage, Caleb. Won't be the first time I've shared a bed." My heart thudded as we walked to the room, the desert air thick with something unspoken. The door creaked open to a dim, musty space with a single queen bed, a lumpy mattress, and a vibe that felt like it was holding its breath. Eli tossed his bag on the floor and flopped onto the bed, arms behind his head, looking entirely too comfortable. "You gonna stand there all night?" he teased, patting the space beside him. I swallowed hard, trying to laugh it off. "I'll take the floor." "Suit yourself, but it's gonna be a long week if you're this uptight." His tone was playful, but his eyes held something heavier, like he was testing me. I busied myself unpacking, avoiding his gaze. The truth was, I wasn't just nervous about sharing a room with Eli. I was terrified of what I felt when he looked at me like I was seen, really seen, for the first time. Growing up in a small town, I'd buried those feelings deep, convincing myself they were just confusion. But Eli, he was unapologetically himself, and it was both thrilling and terrifying. That night, as the desert wind howled outside, I lay on the scratchy carpet, staring at the ceiling. Eli's breathing was steady from the bed, but I could feel his presence like a weight. I didn't know it then, but that motel room was just the beginning to spark that would ignite something I couldn't control. By the time we left, I'd be carrying a secret that would haunt me for years. The next morning, the Desert Rose Motel felt like a fever dream, its neon sign flickering weakly in the dawn light. I woke up stiff from the floor, my neck screaming, but the real ache was in my chest. Eli's words from last night still echoed, "Someone who gets you." I glanced at him, already awake, scrolling through his phone on the bed, his hair a mess, but somehow perfect. "You look like you fought the carpet and lost," he said, smirking as he tossed me a granola bar from his bag. "Thanks for the sympathy," I shot back, catching it. My voice was steadier than I felt. We packed up quickly, the tension from last night lingering like dust in the air. As we hit the road again, the desert gave way to rocky hills, and the silence between us grew heavier. I wanted to ask him about that moment, about what he meant, but every time I opened my mouth, the word stuck. Eli broke the quiet first. "So, Caleb, what's your deal? You're always so guarded. Like you're hiding something." My grip tightened on the wheel. "I'm not hiding anything. Just not a big talker." He laughed, low and warm. "Bullshit. I've known guys like you. You've got a whole world in there." He tapped his temple, "and you're too scared to let it out." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the truth stung too much. Growing up, I'd learned to keep my head down. My dad wasn't the type to tolerate different, and my mom just followed his lead. Jake was the only one who ever seemed to get me, but even he didn't know the half of it. Eli, Thuff saw through me like glass. By midday, we stopped at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, the kind with a single pump and a clerk who looked like he'd seen too many sunsets. Eli wandered off to grab snacks while I filled the tank, my mind replaying his words. When he came back, he tossed me a soda and leaned against the car, too close for comfort. "You ever been in love, Caleb?" he asked, out of nowhere. I nearly dropped the can. What kind of question is that? A real one. His eyes locked on mine, and I felt like I was drowning. "You're 22. You've had to feel something by now." I shrugged, my throat tight. "I don't know. Maybe not. You." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "Once. Didn't end well." The air shifted, like he'd let me in on something sacred. I wanted to ask more, but he pushed off the car and climbed back in, ending the moment. We drove on, the landscape blurring into a haze of red rock and endless sky. That night, we pulled into another motel, this one in Arizona, a little less run down, but still stuck in the 70s. 2 beds this time, thank God. But as we settled in, Eli's mood shifted. He was quieter, his usual charm dialed down. I caught him staring out the window, his reflection sharp against the dark glass. "You okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't turn. "Just thinking about home. Family. Shit I left behind." I hesitated, then sat on the edge of my bed, closer to him than I meant to. "You want to talk about it?" He laughed, but it was hollow. "Not really. But, thanks for asking." For the first time, I saw a crack in his confidence, a glimpse of something raw. I wanted to reach out, to tell him I got it, that I knew what it was like to feel like you didn't belong. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat there, the space between us heavy with things unsaid. As I lay in bed that night, the hum of the motel's ancient AC unit filling the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were heading towards something bigger than either of us could handle. Eli's question about love kept circling in my head, and I wondered if I was already falling into what. I wasn't sure. But the road ahead felt like it was about to test us both. The road stretched on, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through Utah's red canyons, each mile pulling me deeper into a tangle of feelings I couldn't name. Eli was quieter today, his usual banter replaced by long stretches of silence, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I stole glances at him, wondering what had shifted since last night's confession, my heart caught between curiosity and dread. We stopped at a diner for lunch, a retro joint with checkered floors and a jukebox blaring Johnny Cash. Eli slid into the booth across from me, his smile returning but not quite reaching his eyes. You ever feel like you're running from something, even when you're not sure what it is? He asked, stirring his coffee. I froze, my burger halfway to my mouth. All the time, I admitted, surprising myself. Like I'm trying to outrun who I'm supposed to be. His eyes met mine, sharp and searching. And who's that? Caleb. I didn't have an answer. Not one I could say out loud. The truth was, I'd spent years dodging questions about who I was, why I never dated, why I flinched when my dad made cracks about fairies at the dinner table. Eli's openness, his ease with himself, made my own silence feel like a cage. After lunch, we drove toward a national park, the kind of place tourists flock to for selfies with rock formations. Eli insisted we hike, claiming we needed to feel something real. The trail was steep, the air dry and hot, but being out there with him felt like a release. He led the way, his steps sure, while I lagged behind, watching the way he moved, the way the sun caught the sweat on his neck. At the top, we sat on a flat rock overlooking a valley that seemed to stretch forever. Eli pulled out a water bottle and offered it to me, our fingers brushing for a split second. My pulse spiked, and I looked away, pretending to study the view. You're not like Jake, Eli said suddenly. He's all bravado, no depth. You're different. I laughed nervously. Is that a compliment or an insult? A compliment. He turned to face me, his expression serious. You feel things, Caleb. You just don't let yourself show it. My throat tightened. Maybe I don't know how. He held my gaze, and for a moment, I thought he might say something that would change everything. But then he just smiled, soft and sad, and stood up. Come on. We've got a long drive ahead. That night, we checked into a motel just outside Zion. The room was small, the walls paper thin, but it had 2 beds again. I was grateful for the space, but part of me stupid, reckless part missed the tension of that first night. We ate takeout on the floor, talking about nothing and everything, music, college, the dumb things Jake used to do. For a while, it felt easy, like we were just 2 guys on a road trip, not 2 people teetering on the edge of something dangerous. But then Eli's phone buzzed, and his face darkened as he read the screen. Everything okay? I asked, my voice cautious. He sighed, tossing the phone onto the bed. My ex keeps texting me, trying to stir shit up. Your ex? I echoed, my curiosity piqued despite myself. Yeah. We broke up last year. He didn't handle me being out very well. Eli's voice was tight, like he was holding back a storm. Said I was too loud about it. Too much. I didn't know what to say. The idea of someone dimming Eli's light made my chest ache. He sounds like an idiot, I said finally. Eli laughed, but it was brittle. Maybe. But it still fucked me up. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him he was enough more than enough. But I just sat there, the weight of my own silence crushing me. As we turned out the lights, I lay awake, listening to the hum of the motel sign outside, wondering how much longer I could keep pretending I wasn't falling for him. The road through Colorado was a maze of winding mountain passes, each curve pulling us closer to something I couldn't define. Eli was back to his charming self, cracking jokes and singing off-key to the radio, but I could sense the undercurrent of whatever he'd been carrying since that text. I wanted to ask, to dig deeper, but every time I tried, my own fears choked me silent. We stopped at a lookout point, the Rockies sprawling before us like a painting too big to take in. Eli leaned against the guardrail, the wind tugging at his hair. "You ever feel like the world's too big for you?" he asked, his voice almost lost in the breeze. I nodded, stepping closer. "Yeah. Like I'm too small to matter." He turned, his eyes catching mine. "You matter, Caleb. More than you think." My breath hitched, and for a second, I thought he might lean in. But he just clapped me on the shoulder and headed back to the car, leaving me reeling. The rest of the drive was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it's waiting for something to break. By dusk, we pulled into a motel in a small mountain town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business. The clerk, a woman with sharp eyes and a tighter smile, handed us a key to a room with one bed. Again, my stomach dropped, but Eli just shrugged, his grin masking something I couldn't read. The room was cramped, the bed taking up most of the space. Eli kicked off his shoes and sprawled across it, leaving me to hover awkwardly by the door. "You're not sleeping on the floor again," he said, not looking at me. "It's ridiculous. We're adults." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. "Fine. But I'm keeping my side." He laughed, low and warm. "Deal." That night, lying inches from him, I could feel the heat of his body, the rhythm of his breathing. Every nerve in me was on fire, torn between wanting to close the gap and wanting to run. I stared at the ceiling, counting cracks to keep my mind off him, but it was useless. Around midnight, Eli shifted, his voice soft in the dark. "You awake?" "Yeah," I whispered, my voice barely steady. "I'm glad you're here, Caleb. This trip, it's been good for me." My heart stuttered. "Yeah. Yeah." He paused, then added, "You're not what I expected." I turned my head, his face a shadow in the dim light. "What did you expect?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was raw. "Someone who didn't make me feel like this." The words hung between us, heavy and electric. I wanted to ask what he meant, to spill everything I'd been holding back, but fear clamped my mouth shut. Instead, I just lay there, my heart racing, until his breathing evened out and he fell asleep. The next morning, we didn't talk about it. We packed up, hit the road, and pretended nothing had changed. But something had a crack in the wall I'd built around myself, letting in a sliver of hope I wasn't sure I could handle. As we drove through the mountains, I kept stealing glances at Eli, wondering if he felt it too. By the time we reached the next motel, I was a mess of nerves and want. The clerk handed us a key to another single bedroom, and I didn't even protest. Something was building, something inevitable, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it to break. But as we stepped into that room, the air thick with unspoken truths, I knew we were running out of time to keep pretending. The Nebraska plains stretched endless under a gray sky, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. Eli's words from the night before not what I expected had lodged in my chest like a splinter, sharp and impossible to ignore. I drove in silence, the hum of the engine a poor substitute for the courage I needed to speak. Eli seemed restless, flipping through radio stations before settling on silence. "You're quiet again," he said finally, his voice edged with something I couldn't place. "What's going on in that head of yours?" I gripped the wheel, my pulse spiking. "Just thinking about stuff." He raised an eyebrow. "Stuff? Real specific, Caleb." I shot him a look, half annoyed, half terrified. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth." His tone was steady, but his eyes were a challenge. "You've been dodging it since we started this trip." My stomach twisted. He wasn't wrong, but the truth felt like a cliff I wasn't ready to jump off. Instead, I changed the subject. "What about you? You've been weird since that text from your ex." He tensed, then sighed. "Fair. It's just old wounds. You know. He's getting married, and he wanted me to know. Like it's supposed to hurt me." "Does it?" I asked, softer than I meant. He looked out the window, his jaw tight. "Not as much as it used to." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something in me. I wanted to tell him everything, how I'd never felt like this before, how he made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. But the words stayed locked away, buried under years of fear. We pulled into a motel just as the rain started, fat drops splattering the windshield. The place was a dive, all flickering lights and faded wallpaper, but it had 2 beds, and I was grateful for the breathing room. Or so I thought. As we settled in, Eli pulled out a deck of cards from his bag. "Poker," he suggested, his grin back, but softer, like he was trying to lighten the mood. I nodded, desperate for a distraction. We sat cross-legged on the floor, the cards a flimsy barrier between us. He won the first hand, laughing as he claimed my pile of pretzels. "You're terrible at bluffing," he said, his eyes glinting. "Maybe I'm not trying to bluff," I shot back, surprising myself. His smile faltered, and for a moment, the air felt charged, like a storm about to break. He leaned closer, his voice low. "Then what are you doing, Caleb?" My heart pounded so loud I was sure he could hear it. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. His gaze held mine, searching, and I felt like I was falling. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at it, his face hardening, and tossed it aside. Another text. I asked, my voice tight. "Yeah," he muttered. "Doesn't matter." But it did. I could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his smile didn't quite return. We played a few more hands, but the ease was gone. When we finally turned in, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the rain drumming outside like it was trying to drown my thoughts. In the middle of the night, I heard Eli shift, his voice barely a whisper. "Caleb, you ever feel like you're running out of time?" I turned toward him, his silhouette faint in the dark. "Yeah," I said, my voice raw. "All the time." He didn't say anything else, but the silence felt different now, like we were both holding our breath, waiting for something to give. I didn't know it then, but that motel, that night, was the tipping point. The next one would break us open, and there'd be no going back. The rain followed us into Iowa, turning the roads slick and the sky a relentless gray. Eli was quieter than ever, his usual charm buried under something heavy. I wanted to ask about the text, about what was eating at him, but every time I looked at him, my own secrets choked me silent. We stopped at a roadside diner for lunch, the kind with greasy eggs and coffee that tasted like regret. Eli barely touched his food, his eyes fixed on the window, watching the rain streak down. "You ever wish you could just start over?" he asked, his voice so low I almost missed it. I set my fork down, my chest tight. "Yeah." but I'm not sure I'd know how. He looked at me then, his eyes raw, like he was seeing something in me I hadn't shown anyone. You'd figure it out, Caleb. You're stronger than you think. The words hit harder than they should have, and I looked away, my face burning. The rest of the meal passed in silence, the weight of his gaze lingering like a touch. By evening, we pulled into a motel just off the highway, the neon sign buzzing, no vacancy except for one room. One bed. Again. The clerk didn't even look up as she handed us the key, and I followed Eli to the room, my heart pounding with every step. The room was small, the air thick with the smell of old carpet and cheap air freshener. Eli dropped his bag and flopped onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. "You gonna make me beg you to share the bed again?" he asked, his voice teasing but tired. I forced a laugh, my nerves fraying. "Fine. But don't hog the blankets." He grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. We changed in silence, the tension between us a living thing. When I climbed into bed, keeping as close to the edge as possible, I could feel him beside me, his warmth a pull I couldn't ignore. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of rain and Eli's voice, barely a whisper. "Caleb." "Yeah." My voice was hoarse, my heart racing. "I'm scared," he said, so quiet I thought I'd misheard. I turned to face him, his features soft in the dim light. "Of what?" He hesitated, then rolled onto his side, facing me. "Of fucking this up. Of wanting something I shouldn't." My breath caught, the air between us electric. I could see it in his eyes, the same fear, the same one I'd been fighting since the first mile. "Eli," I started, but the words died. He reached out, his hand brushing mine under the blanket, and my whole body lit up. "Tell me I'm not crazy," he whispered. "Tell me you feel it too." I couldn't lie. Not anymore. "You're not crazy," I said, my voice breaking. And then he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was giving me a chance to pull away. But I didn't. I kissed him back, desperate and hungry, years of buried feelings spilling out. His hands found my face, my hair, and for a moment, the world was just us, the rain, and the truth I'd been running from. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "I didn't plan this," he said, his voice raw. "But I don't want to stop." "Me neither," I admitted, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break. We fell asleep tangled together, the rain a steady rhythm outside. But even as I drifted off, a part of me knew this was only the beginning of the storm. What happened in that motel would haunt me, not because it was wrong, but because it was the first time I felt alive. Morning light filtered through the motel's thin curtains, casting shadows across Eli's sleeping face. I lay there, my heart still racing from the night before, his arm draped across my chest like it belonged there. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe until the weight of what we'd done crashed down. Eli stirred, his eyes fluttering open, and when he saw me, he smiled, soft and real. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I echoed, my throat tight. I wanted to stay in that moment, but reality was already creeping in. Jake, my family, the life I'd been hiding from. We didn't talk about the kiss as we packed up, but the air between us was different, charged with something fragile and new. On the road, Eli reached for my hand, his fingers lacing through mine, and I let him. It felt reckless, like we were stealing time that didn't belong to us. By noon, we were in Illinois, the landscape flattening into fields that stretched forever. Eli was back to his old self, teasing me about my terrible taste in music, but every laugh felt like a gift. Still, I could sense the undercurrent. His phone hadn't buzzed again. But whatever his ex had stirred up was still there, lurking. We stopped at a small-town diner for dinner, the kind of place where the locals stared a little too long. As we sat in a booth, Eli's knee brushed mine under the table, and I didn't pull away. But when a group of guys at the counter started whispering, their eyes on us, my stomach twisted. "You okay?" Eli asked, his voice low. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." He didn't buy it, but he let it go. Back on the road, the silence returned, heavier now. I kept replaying the kiss, the way it felt like coming home, but also the fear that followed. What was this? A fling? Something more? And what would happen when we got to New York? That night, we checked into another motel, this one with 2 beds, but Eli didn't hesitate. He climbed into mine, pulling me close. "We don't have to figure it out tonight," he whispered, like he could read my mind. I nodded, burying my face in his shoulder, but the questions kept coming. What would Jake think? What would my parents do if they found out? I'd spent my whole life trying to be the son they wanted, but Eli made me want to be someone else, someone brave. The next morning, as we loaded the car, Eli's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, his face darkening, and shoved it into his pocket. "You gonna tell me what's going on?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's my ex. He's threatening to out me to my family. They don't know yet." I froze, my heart sinking. "What? Why would he do that?" "Because he's pissed I moved on," Eli said, his voice bitter. "He thinks he can control me." Anger flared in me, hot and unfamiliar. "He can't do that. You don't owe him anything." Eli looked at me, his eyes softening. "I know. But it's not that simple." I wanted to fix it, to protect him, but I didn't know how. As we drove on, the weight of his secret mingled with mine, binding us together in a way I hadn't expected. The road was running out, and so was our time to pretend this could last. The final stretch to New York felt like a countdown, each mile marker a reminder that this whatever it was with Eli was about to end. The city skyline loomed closer, a jagged promise of reality waiting to pull us apart. I drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tangled with Eli's, both of us clinging to the last moments of this fragile bubble we'd built. We stopped at a rest area in Pennsylvania, the air crisp with the first hint of fall. Eli leaned against the car, his eyes distant. "What happens when we get there?" he asked, his voice quiet but heavy. I swallowed, my chest tight. "I don't know. What do you want to happen?" He looked at me, his gaze raw. "I want you, Caleb. But I don't know if you're ready for that." The words hit like a punch. He was right, I wasn't ready. Not fully. But the thought of losing him, of going back to the person I was before this trip, felt like losing myself. "I'm trying," I said, my voice breaking. "I just need time." He nodded, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. "I get it. But I can't wait forever." The rest of the drive was quiet, the weight of his words settling between us. By the time we reached the last motel, just outside New York City, I was a mess of fear and hope. The room was small, one bed, and when we climbed in together, it felt like a goodbye. We lay there in the dark, his arms around me, and I finally found the courage to speak. "I'm scared, Eli. Scared of what this means, of what people will think. But I don't want to lose you." He tightened his hold, his breath warm against my neck. "You don't have to lose me. But you have to choose yourself first." I didn't sleep that night, his words echoing in my head. Choose myself. I'd never done that. Not really. But as the sun rose, painting the room gold, I knew I couldn't go back to hiding. The next morning, we drove into the city, delivering Jake's car to his new apartment. Jake was waiting, all grins and bear hugs, oblivious to the storm inside me. "You two survive each other?" he asked, clapping Eli on the back. "Barely," Eli said, his smile masking the truth. We said our goodbyes, and as Jake headed inside, Eli pulled me aside. "I'm not giving up on you, Caleb. But you need to figure out what you want." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He kissed me, quick and fierce, then turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the shadow of the city. Months later, I still think about that motel, the one where we kissed, where I admitted I felt it too. It haunts me, not because it was wrong, but because it was the first time I saw who I could be. I came out to Jake a week after we got back, and to my parents a month later. It wasn't easy. Me dad barely speaks to me now, but I'm learning to live with it. Eli and I talk sometimes. Late-night texts that feel like lifelines. He's giving me space, but I know he's waiting. And I'm trying, every day, to choose myself, to be brave enough for both of us. The road trip ended, but the journey it started, the one toward who I am, will stay with me forever.